Hello, this is Dr. Fala. I want to talk about a number of quality management tools in this session. Your reading material provided description and examples of a larger tool used by management and quality improvement teams. In this session, I focus on a few key process management tools. Now, let me start with process mapping. So, what is a process? Process is a set of interrelated activities that are characterized by a set of input, a number of value-added tasks, and a set of output. And here we've shown that at a high level with an example of here are the inputs, value-added tasks within the process as a box, and then whatever the output is produced. So the question is, why do we focus on the process? Because the process can help us understand how the business is managed, how the project is managed. We can distinguish between value-added activities and wasteful effort or non-value-added activities. We can improve the business efficiency. We can improve process effectiveness and improve customer satisfaction, and ultimately create more competitive advantage. So mapping a process, we're also calling it process map or flowcharting. Flowcharting or the process map itself is a graphical representation of the process. It shows all the activities involved in their inputs and outputs, and all the decision points. It could also show process performance, such as process time, waiting time, delay time, efforts, defects, cost. Those can be overlaid on the process activities. Flowchart can be created at different levels, at the very high level or at the more detailed level. So I'm showing here 3 levels of processes. One, process level 1. That's the highest level, normally shown by one box. It could be the entire company and you have inputs and outputs, or it could be development or systems engineering. Depending on what you want to define as a process, it can be shown by one box. At the level 2, we're really going into the level 1 details of what is involved in the level 1. And we can then pull out sub-processes and lay them out as a level 2 process here, as I've shown, process 1, process 2, process 3. For example, if you're talking about development and delivery of a software system to a customer, so a high-level process could be just the entire development and delivery process as one box. At the level 2, then you can break that down to systems engineering, design, coding, testing, and delivery. So these each become a sub-process and a process on its own. The level 3 is when we go further down into the details of tasks and activities at the primary level. And that's very helpful when you want to analyze a process at that level to find out what changes is necessary to make improvement to the process. So how do we do flowcharting? Just like any language, there's a number of symbols that are used to map a process, and I have listed them here. Operations are shown normally by a rectangular box. Decisions are shown by diamonds. Documents and paper documents shown by a stack of papers. Then we have delays shown as a symbol like here. Waiting time as a upside down triangle. Data storage shows like a disk. Then we connect the elements of the process together by using arrows, which shows the direction of the flow. Connectors is used when processes are longer than fit on one page, and then you want to continue to another page, then you can use a circle as a connector and number them so that you know where it goes next. And boundaries for the start and the stop of a process, we'll show them by an ellipse here. So how do we create a process map? To really do a good process map is to assemble a small team of the people that are involved in the process and bring them, for example, to a conference room, agree on the scope of the process, or where does it start and where does it end, and then use flip charts on the wall or on easels to map the process. And using post-its is a good efficient way of identifying the task, and if necessary move them around and then connect them with markers. So begin at the starting point and identify what's the next box, define what that box is in terms of the activity, what's an input, where does it go to the next box, and so on, and continue through the process to get to the end. And along the way, for each box we identify who's the owner. So particularly if you're doing a development map, then you have identified different groups as these swim lanes vertically drawn, and then you can move and identify each box under the specific owner group. And I define the outputs, where does it go, and any loopbacks. For example, if there are reworks and things have to go back to the previous steps, we identify those, and arrows goes back to the earlier steps as necessary. And then you continue this process till you finish the flowchart. Then as a team, you look at the flowchart, make additional changes if necessary until everybody agrees that that's a good map. Then you can take those flip charts, and somebody offline can turn them into a documented process. The best software to create process map is Visio, but it can also be done in Word or in Excel or PowerPoint, for example. Now, once the process is documented, then you want to circulate that to the entire team and all the stakeholders to make sure that everybody agrees that this is a correct process as is. And then if there's any necessary changes, you can make those and then finalize the process. So let's talk about a few important points to keep in mind. First, you want to draw the process at an appropriate level. You don't want a process that goes too far out. That's really not the focus of your team or what you want to study or identify or make improvement to. So drawing the process at that within that scope is very important, and drilling down to the level of details in the areas that you necessarily want to focus. Also, remember that every path has to connect to another box and eventually end with the end point of the process. No arrows should be hanging out somewhere without going to another box. Each step should have one or more input and at least one output. Normally, a task at the primary level has one output. If you have multiple outputs, it indicates that you're really looking at a compound process. In other words, there are multiple tasks within that box that could be expanded as shown as a separate task if necessary. Each decision has one or more input, but two outputs. One is a yes and one is a no. Decision is a binary activity. So if you only have one output, then it's not complete. You're going to need to show that decision where it goes if it is yes and where it goes if it is no. As I pointed out earlier, the process map should show the process as is, not the way it was originally defined or it's documented in a binder, how people are actually doing it today. And then after the process map is created, the team can review and discuss opportunities for improvement, and things can be done to impact the process and remove issues that, for example, we wanted to address in terms of a process management team. So there are two types of process maps. Most of you may be familiar with a linear flow chart. That's the simplest way of creating a process map, by linking all the tasks together linearly from start to finish. But a more important, more valuable process map is what we call a deployment flow chart, or is also called a swim lane flow chart, which shows responsibility and ownership of each task by a functional group or a team or a person. So let me show two examples of this. Here's an example of a linear process map, an old process of changing the oil in your car. So when you decided to change the oil, the car needs to be warmed up and the engine be shut off after that. Get the rag and tools, and then if oil and filter is available, you change the oil and filter, and then clean up. These are the sequence, and if the oil and filter is not available, then here's the decision saying no, you go and buy oil and filter, and then come back, change the oil, and clean up. Now we can take the same process map and show it as a deployment map or a swim lane map, where here I've identified three people: Chuck, Nancy, and Bob. So Chuck decides that we need to change the oil, tells Nancy to warm up the engine. Nancy warms up the engine and then shuts it off, and tell Bob that okay, the engine is ready. Bob gets racks and tool, and then there's a decision point as we had before. Do we have oil and filter or not? If the answer is yes, you change the oil and filter and then clean up. All these activities under Bob responsibility. If we don't have oil or filter or both, then Bob tells Chuck to go and buy alternate oil and filter, and we've shown that under Chuck. And then once he gets the oil and filter, come back and give them to Bob, who complete the process by changing the oil and filter and then cleaning up the tool and putting them away. So here again, this is the same process, but clearly identify who is responsible for what activities. This becomes very important when you're dealing with cross-functional team, where it goes across multiple departments and there are ownership and responsibility, and if you have to make changes to processes and making improvement, it's important to see where all those tasks and activities fall and what are the interfaces. So how do we review the process map for improvement? Well, there are a number of questions that you can ask once you have the process map with your improvement team looking at it. Well, first thing is that, are there any steps that can be eliminated or combined? Are there any decisions that can be eliminated or combined? Because some of those could actually lead to a lot of delays, particularly if some of these decisions requires approval, and then you have to wait for those approvals, and sometimes you're not getting them as quickly. Are there any bottlenecks in the process that causing delay, and we need to see if we can remove those or reduce them. Then identify root causes of the rework and defects and delays, and develop countermeasures to reduce, eliminate those. Identify opportunity for improvement through automation. These days, technology can actually help significantly to change all the processes and make efficiency and effectiveness improvement to the process. And then once you have made all those improvements, you want to revise the map accordingly, create a revised map, validate those identified improvements, and then implement the improvements and keep the gain.